The dragon's descent, from economic miracle to crisis. For decades, China's economic rise seemed unstoppable. The nation transformed from a poor agrarian society to a global superpower, boasting the world's second-largest economy. Factories hummed, skyscrapers pierced the sky, and millions were lifted from poverty. This remarkable growth, however, has come to a shuddering halt. China now faces an economic crisis of unprecedented proportions. The once booming economy is slowing down at an alarming rate. The property market, a key driver of growth, is teetering on the brink of collapse. Mountains of debt threaten to engulf businesses and local governments. The aftershocks of the draconian zero-COVID policy continue to disrupt global supply chains. Public discontent is brewing, with protests erupting across the country. The government's response has been a mix of stimulus measures and tightened control, but the path ahead remains uncertain. The world watches anxiously as the dragon stumbles, its future hanging in the balance. A slowing engine, declining growth, and its causes. The first alarm bell is China's plummeting GDP growth. For years, the nation enjoyed a seemingly unstoppable expansion, with GDP growth consistently exceeding 6%. Those days are gone. In 2023, GDP growth tumbled to a paltry 3%, a far cry from the robust figures of the past. The situation has only worsened in 2024, with growth struggling to reach the government's target of 5%. Several factors contribute to this slowdown. One significant challenge is China's aging population, a consequence of the now abandoned one-child policy. As the workforce shrinks, productivity dwindles, and consumer spending weakens. Furthermore, the global economic slowdown, fueled by geopolitical tensions and rising inflation, has dampened demand for Chinese exports. The government's tight grip on the economy, characterized by heavy state intervention and a preference for state-owned enterprises, has also stifled innovation and dynamism. Private businesses, the traditional engines of growth, face an increasingly challenging environment. These factors, combined with a lack of consumer confidence, paint a bleak picture for China's economic future. The property crisis, a house of cards, collapses. China's economic woes are inextricably linked to its property market, which has long been a cornerstone of the nation's growth. The sector's troubles came to a head in 2021 with the spectacular collapse of Evergrande, a real estate giant, under a mountain of debt exceeding $300 billion. This default sent shockwaves through the market, exposing the fragility of countless other over-leveraged developers. As property values plummet and construction projects stall, the crisis has spread beyond the real estate sector. Banks, heavily exposed to property loans, face a surge in bad debts. Local governments, reliant on land sales for revenue, are struggling to fund essential services. The ripple effects are felt across the economy, undermining consumer confidence and investment. The government has announced measures to stabilize the market, including easing lending restrictions and encouraging banks to restructure loans. However, these efforts have so far failed to stem the tide. The property crisis is a stark reminder of the risks associated with China's debt-fueled growth model and its over-reliance on a single sector. Section 4. Drowning in debt, a looming threat to stability. Underlying China's economic woes is a mountain of debt that threatens to engulf the entire nation. Years of reckless lending, fueled by a desire to maintain high growth rates, have left businesses and local governments drowning in red ink. Corporate debt has ballooned to an estimated $14 trillion, while local governments have accumulated trillions more in off-balance sheet liabilities. Much of this debt is hidden within China's shadow banking system, a vast network of unregulated lenders that operate outside the traditional banking sector. The opacity of this system makes it difficult to assess the true scale of the problem, but experts warn that it poses a significant systemic risk. As borrowing costs rise and economic growth slows, the risk of defaults and financial contagion increases. The government faces a delicate balancing act. On the one hand, it must rein in excessive lending and address the risks posed by the shadow banking system. On the other hand, it must avoid triggering a wave of defaults that could cripple the financial system and plunge the economy into a deep recession. Section 5. Zero COVID's lingering shadow global supply chain disruptions. While China has officially abandoned its controversial zero COVID policy, the economic scars remain, particularly in the form of global supply chain disruptions. For nearly 3 years, the world grappled with the consequences of China's stringent lockdowns and border closures, which brought factories to a standstill and created bottlenecks in the flow of goods. Although some normalcy has returned to global trade, the aftershocks of this disruption continue to reverberate. Businesses worldwide face higher shipping costs, longer lead times, and shortages of critical components. These disruptions have fueled inflation, slowed economic growth, and forced companies to rethink their reliance on China as a manufacturing powerhouse. The pandemic exposed the vulnerability of global supply chains to disruption and highlighted the need for greater diversification and resilience. It also accelerated the trend toward regionalization, with companies seeking to shorten supply chains by sourcing goods closer to home. These shifts are likely to have long-term implications for global trade patterns and China's role in the global economy. Section 6. A future uncertain challenges and potential solutions. The road ahead for China's economy is fraught with challenges. The government faces the daunting task of addressing structural imbalances, reining in debt, and restoring confidence in the face of mounting public discontent. Failure to do so could have dire consequences not only for China but for the global economy as a whole. Addressing the property crisis is paramount. This requires a multi-pronged approach that includes addressing oversupply, restructuring debt, and providing support to struggling homeowners. Equally important is the need to tackle the mountain of debt that weighs on the economy. This will require a combination of debt restructuring, fiscal consolidation, and financial sector reforms. Beyond these immediate challenges, China must undertake deeper structural reforms to transition from its investment-driven growth model to a more sustainable and balanced approach. This includes fostering innovation, promoting domestic consumption, and reducing the role of the state in the economy. The path ahead is uncertain, but one thing is clear. China's economic future will have profound implications for the entire world.